This podcast was recorded before recent federal policy changes impacted many of the programs discussed and may not reflect the most current information.
Welcome to How to Not Kill Your Community, a podcast from the Delaware Community Foundation. In each episode, we interview experts to explore the choices we make as Delawareans, how we spend our taxes, steward our land, build housing, and how those choices impact the places we call home. What happens if we neglect our libraries, turn away newcomers, let philanthropy fade? Most importantly, how do we not kill our communities? I'm Stuart Comstock-Gay, President and CEO of the DCF. Thank you for listening. All right, welcome back again to How to Not Kill Your Community, our podcast series this year. Today, thrilled to have our guests who I have great admiration for the work they do. I'm going to introduce you both, and then we'll get into the guts of this and figure out how to kill our community. So start with Jac Rivers, who is Vice President and Program Officer at JPMorgan Chase, and you lead the firm's strategic philanthropic investments in Delaware, Pennsylvania, and South Jersey. Background in law, public policy, governmental administration, focusing on innovative approaches to racial equity and wealth creation for Black and Latino communities. Used to work as Chief of Staff in the Managing Director's Office in Philadelphia. That's the city of Philadelphia. JD from University of Maryland. And Bachelor's and Master's from Lehigh University. Welcome, Jac.
Thank you.
Chris Gunter is Community Impact and Investment Philanthropy Lead at Cap One in Wilmington, where you direct the Foundation's philanthropic investments across the Delaware Valley and Midwest. It's my home place, baby.
Love that.
Midwest. We can talk about that.
Yes, we can.
Work emphasizes enhancing socioeconomic mobility through innovative programs, inclusive products, and impactful philanthropy. I like that. Also a certified diversity professional with research interests in racially based police targeting, reentry process of African American males, post-correction, such important issues, and with a BS in criminology and public admin from University of Delaware and a Master's of Science focusing on criminal behavior from WilmU.
Yeah.
Welcome, Chris. Welcome, Jac.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. So this whole podcast is about how we can kill our community. What are the things we can do to crush our community's spirit and soul and effectiveness? And so in this episode, we're going to talk about local talent and the local workforce. And so Equitable Hiring Initiative, why do equitable hiring practices matter for our community? Aren't certain people just less prepared, and shouldn't we just let them find their own way?
That is a deep question.
Yeah.
It's very loaded. I can take the first stab at it, and Jac, feel free to add in. So first and foremost, when we think about the population that will be supported by the Equitable Hiring Initiative, we know that there are certain social dynamics that are at play that keep folks historically not at the same level as other people, not providing the same level of training. And what we know is there are populations, pockets of people in Wilmington particularly they've been historically overlooked, or talent who has been historically not given the same level of access to opportunities to actually show up. And so what the Equitable Hiring Initiative at its core is intended to do is actually engage those people, those individuals where they are, providing them with the right level of support and training that would ultimately help them shepherd into a successful job paying a livable wage.
Yeah.
You
know, I would add, when we talk about equity, I think it's really focusing on self-determination and the ability for people to make decisions in their own lives that impact their quality of life and help them achieve what they want to achieve, purpose.
Yeah.
And so when we're looking at equity in terms of workforce development, it's really meeting people where they are. And as Chris said, making sure that individuals have access to the tools and resources they need to really effectuate that self-determination, to figure out what they want to do, who they want to be, and get there.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, because of course the people talking about equity, it's gotten so distorted about it, and it's not about most of what's talked about publicly. It's a political thing. I think about also, and this I don't think is directly in your program, but the way boys and girls learn differently, and we know that's true. And the classroom situation, sitting in a classroom, following the rules. Girls are way better at that than boys are. Yeah. And we have lost a lot of boys for a whole lot of reasons who are struggling. And is that also the kind of thing you're thinking of?
Yeah, it's really looking back at systemic barriers, as Chris mentioned, historical barriers. We know that in these communities, with EHI, with the Equitable Hiring Initiative, we're focused on 19801, 802, and 805. Right. We know that there are deep pockets of concentrated poverty in these neighborhoods. There are food deserts in these neighborhoods. They are cut off from, the main arteries of the city, where we're looking at health disparities, educational attainment disparities in, reading and math. And so when you have these issues in community, it's hard for individuals to compete for jobs, right? And so there's a lack of economic mobility, and what we're looking to do is infuse resources and opportunity in these communities.
Chris? I want to pull on that thread a little bit more, because I think Jac set the perfect stage for understanding really the landscape of the communities that we're really looking to engage. But I think 2 years ago, when Jac and I put our heads together to really figure out how do we help to solve this issue, it was really through the lens of, we were hearing from employers in Delaware that there was this big gap of folks that they couldn't find. They had jobs that were available, and they felt like they couldn't have, or they couldn't find the right talent to fit those jobs. And when we started to do some market level research and understanding that at that time, Delaware had the really high unemployment rates, that they were people who had ability and propensity to learn, but they just simply were not being engaged. So it felt like it was a mismatch, right? So people are looking for jobs, there are people here, but they just don't have the right training. And so really thinking about how do we bring those two parties together, this is why the EHI really helps to fill that gap. Right, because it's really, I call it bilingual. We're speaking the language of the community, but we also understand the elements that the companies and the employers are looking for, employers of all sizes in Delaware, and helping to really make and bridge the gap for both of those communities.
So I love that. So when we talk about the Equitable Hiring Initiative, you really are focused on employers, credible messengers, and community-based solutions.
Yes. And so following up, dovetailing off of what you just said, Chris, as philanthropists, as funders, we have invested a lot of money in community organizations that are upskilling individuals, credentialing individuals. And what we are hearing from our community partner organizations is that even with additional training and credentials, we're not seeing employers hire from local talent, hire from our communities, hire local talent from our communities. And, these organizations will hire coordinators and employment engagement coordinators to no end, right? We're not seeing the movement and the pipelines into these large companies that we know exist in Delaware,
Absolutely.
Right? Delaware offers a lot of tax benefits. We know a lot of large companies are headquartered here. There is a lot of local talent, and we're not seeing the marriage between the employers and the talent. And so EHI attempts to address that gap, right? We know that there are 63 workers for every 100 jobs that are available. There is a need for talent in the state.
Absolutely.
And in so many surveys of employers in this state, the thing we hear is, I can't find employees.
Exactly.
And so when you talk to other employers, your bank's among them, but outside of that, this is what you're hearing is, I can't find people.
Absolutely.
And what you're trying to do is say, we got a way.
It's a win-win for everyone.
Yes.
It's a benefit for the not only employers, but for the community members. And I think to pull on what Jac was referring to, we make all of these wonderful singular investments to nonprofit partners, and where the gap is, it feels so siloed. And what EHI really intends to do is to build the right ecosystem that really pulls together the partners to create the right flow between employer, between training provider, between community messenger and credible messengers, to really pull it all together and tie a pretty bow around it in this initial pilot.
Yeah. And I think it helps that JPMorgan Chase and Cap One are at the table.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Right?
It's huge.
JPMorgan Chase really serves as a model employer for inclusive hiring. Year over year since 2025, we hire over 4,000 individuals who have a criminal background in our global company. We work with HR to look at a skills-based approach to hiring as opposed to just focusing on a credential like a bachelor's degree. We offer employee volunteerism and co-host with community organization expungement clinics to help also remove a barrier to employment. So we understand we are a highly regulated financial institution, right? And we have figured out how to look at local talent and remove barriers and include them, in the workforce.
That to me is a really important message, right? You're a bank, for goodness sake.
Yes.
Right. You can't afford to mess around with this, and bringing people, ex-offenders into the community, say, we need you as part of our community.
Right.
And I know, Chris, this is something you're working on a lot too.
Absolutely.
That issue alone
Yeah.
Yes.
is a critical issue. And do you get pushback?
I don't, I'm going to answer this question first, which was not a question. I'm going to ask my own question. It's difficult to not engage with this audience of folks. When we look at the 1 million people in Delaware, 40% of them have been justice impacted in some way. So to say that we're taking them completely off the table is just not a smart business move. It's not a good economic development move for the state of Delaware, because that's almost half of the people here.
Yeah.
Right. And so we needed to be smart around how we were engaging with this population, because it was a complete miss on our part.
Yes.
And
that data point is even more acute in Wilmington.
Absolutely.
Right? And so if
Yep,
it's
yep, yep.
40%
And the
across the
state.
state, it's over 50%, closer to 56% in Wilmington.
And what pushback do you get inside your companies?
Around this initiative?
Yeah. And around hiring people who are ex-offenders.
None. Right? We are on the front lines.
And your program works.
And our program works. And in fact, our market leader, Tom Horn, is serving as the executive sponsor of the Equitable Hiring Initiative to really leverage his partnerships and his presence in the market, in the community, to encourage other employers to at least hear about EHI.
Yeah.
And what we're learning, Chris, is that employers understand the business case for inclusive hiring.
Absolutely.
Right?
That was how we had to put this together initially. It wasn't that we were really trying to do any more social cause work, or this is just what Chris loves so much. Like, there's a business case to be made.
Yeah.
And I think that was what really pushed and created leverage for us to make these big investments in the community.
Yes. The business case is there, and employers were stuck
Yeah.
with knowledge and understanding of the business case and couldn't figure out how to bridge the gap to action, right? Yes, I understand that there is talent out there, that when you hire from this talent, it lifts up the entire community. This demographic, once you give them a chance and you hire them, they are loyal and you will retain that talent in your company. Employers understand that, but they don't necessarily know how to go about removing those barriers.
Yeah.
Sometimes HR policies and practices have been in place for decades, right?
Age-old.
Yes, and how do you begin dismantling that and thinking about new ways to include a talented workforce?
The credential thing, I want to go back to that for a second, right? We, for so many years, this country, every kind of hiring, we've been stuck on the credential side, as opposed to experience. Right, we've changed in the last 5 years about how we post jobs for that reason, and the kind of candidates we get is just drastically different, and we've made some incredible hires because of that. So I think it is something we all need to wrap our heads around.
Absolutely. And so what the Equitable Hiring Initiative does is provide a 4 to 6 month training.
Yeah.
Our training provider is Jobs for the Future, a national organization that leads in workforce development solutions and provides a landscape assessment analysis of an employer's hiring practices, right? So Jac Rivers, I'm with JPMorgan Chase. I participate in EHI and work with the providers to understand where the barriers are. And then work alongside the providers to address and mitigate some of those barriers. And once I complete that training, I am then connected to a pool of talent that I can then hire from for these positions.
And talk about the side of it which also works directly with applicants.
Yes. So that's the second leg of the stool. The first component of EHI is the employer engagement and training strategy. And the second component is our talent engagement and training strategy. And so we are working with the Carey Collective out of Chicago to train up local providers in their trauma-informed power skills training model. To prepare individuals for the workplace. We know from working with the Workforce Board here in Delaware that from an employer survey that was done 2 years ago, that over 60% of employers in the state of Delaware are unhappy with the soft skills, power skills that folks come in to the workplace with.
And
right?
say precisely what that is for people who don't know.
Yeah, so it is the ability to call out of work in an appropriate way, right? It's the ability to communicate with my manager that I don't understand the assignment or I need more time. It's how do I call out of work when I'm sick? Or, it is all of the social and the nuanced skills that it requires to work in a workplace setting alongside of your peers.
And these are all muscles that we've had to build over the years, just being in corporate environments, the small elements that you don't even realize you are adapting or modifying to, right? But this is something that we want to certainly distill down in a curriculum and make sure that we are passing along to people before they actually enter into the job space.
20 years ago, my wife was involved with a program in Vermont, and this is exactly what they were working on. And it was mostly in Burlington, like people who didn't know how to take a day off and didn't know what to do if their car broke down.
Exactly.
They literally did not know what to do. And it was training people. Here's how you manage that. And so this is not a new issue.
It's not a new issue.
It's been around for a long time.
Yes. And I think what happens is a lot of times people like Chris and I and others will sit in a room and identify a problem and create some solutions and push it out to community.
That's not what this is.
And that's not what this is. We wanted to be very intentional about understanding the needs of employers, but understanding the needs of the talent in community as well as their perceived barriers to workforce. We hear a lot from community that there are all these programs out there, all these promises made, work is coming, and then nothing happens, right? And people are left holding the bag wondering, like, how am I gonna feed myself and my family? And so we also were very intentional leading into the third component, community engagement, to have community at the table from conception through implementation.
Absolutely.
Community organizations are great partners, but they don't reach everyone. Not everyone in community is connected to a community organization, a Y or a Goodwill or a United Way. And so we are working with credible messengers, individuals with lived experience who have done extensive survey research to understand these perceived barriers. And they sit at the table alongside of us and bring that information back, really telling us what needs to happen here, what are the resources that need to happen, and continually pushing information from EHI into community. This is what we're building. This is how long it's going to take. And helping them understand there are going to be hiccups, right? This is a pilot. And we are all figuring it out, to use the overly used analogy. We're building the plane as we're flying it, and we're asking the community to work with us and be patient. Right? This is a collaborative effort.
Absolutely, and I just wanted to add, there's a level of self-awareness that you have to have doing this work, especially when we're working with very niche populations of folks, people who have historically been overlooked. And so Jac and I, who work at wonderful institutions, we know that there are some perceptions that come with that. And so when we were developing...
Suspicion, perhaps?
Potentially, allegedly. We wanted to make sure that we were bringing community along the journey, which is how we really developed this cohort model of credible messengers, people who are deeply entrenched in community. They have already an embedded level of trust by the community, and we're able to have that two-way bilateral communication between what our thoughts are and understanding what their thoughts are, and making sure that we're really getting to the best product, like looking at the set of problems from all angles to ensure that there are no dark spots when we are developing our framework for what the pilot looks like and how we move the work forward.
Right.
So this isn't precisely what you're saying, but I want to get to, there's too often there has been missing in philanthropy a certain humility. Right? And this is from big corporations, it's from philanthropy, it's from government. Too often it's, we know the answers and we'll tell you what's going to work. And the truth is, that ain't where it's happening. That's a piece, right? Expertise, knowledge of things happening elsewhere matters. Knowledge of what's going on in your institutions. Hey, we've seen this work, but that's not enough.
That's not enough.
You got to listen to people and say, what would work with you? And that doesn't mean they're always right. Doesn't mean you're always wrong.
I think there's such an important layer of there's the research and there's the data, but there's those anecdotal stories that matter that we have to overlay on top of the data when we're thinking about this work.
And so to build on that, what we are promising employers is there's talent, right? And so we know the credible messengers are not only doing survey research, they are building this pipeline of potential workers for these employers. And so we are communicating with employers that you won't have this problem. At the end of the program, you're not going to be wondering, where are the people that I can hire? They are there. We are beginning to train them up, and we'll continue on that journey alongside of you. It's not as though we ask employers to complete the training and then leave them to find their own talent. We will
bridging the gap.
We'll bridge the gap and continue to support the individuals, the talent, as they are acclimating to their new employment, and stay with them for a year, right? Until they're settled and adjusted.
And so that doesn't mean everybody who wants a job is qualified for every job that's available.
Correct.
It really means working with. It means, say, so if somebody said, well, some people aren't ready. Why are you making me hire them?
And I think that's a good point. And so I want to just double click a little bit on the criteria for the talent as well as for the employers, right?
Please.
Yeah. So for the talent, this program is not for everyone. This is focused on individuals who are at least 18 years of age or older, who already have a GED.
Or a high school diploma.
Thank you. Who are stable in community, right? So EHI is not providing a host of housing resources and food resources and behavioral health resources. Individuals will have to navigate those resources on their own, but we are looking for individuals who are already stable in community and who have a history of employment. Right. It could be 2 months at the Taco Bell, it could be 5 years at Home Depot. We don't care, but we want to know that you are ready to work and you've demonstrated that. And so this is really an opportunity for those individuals to upskill, to gain additional skills, and have access to opportunity and economic mobility. And on the employer side, we are looking for mid to large sized employers. We are industry agnostic, but we require that these employers pay a livable and sustainable wage, which is variable, right?
Some flexibility there.
Yeah. All right. So for our program, we started at $25 an hour because that's really what a livable, sustainable wage is, around $50,000 to $55,000 a year.
Yep.
But that's hard, Stu. It was hard to find companies who were willing to engage with us and participate, who are paying that amount of money. And so we had to be flexible, right? We had to adjust a little bit, and we're down to $18. So at least $18 an hour to start. But we really do not want to pipeline individuals into, dead-end opportunities. That's not what EHI is about. We understand that those opportunities are a first step for some folks, but for the demographic we're looking for, and for the intention of this program and the outcomes that we seek, we are looking for employers who are paying a livable, sustainable wage and offering some benefits and economic mobility for their employees.
I was going to say, so this is really about building mobility
Yes.
for the workers,
Yes.
for the people in the community, and a strong workforce for the employers.
Absolutely.
So if this goes great, and people say, yeah, we're going to adopt this, what's different in our community in 10 years?
They won't need it anymore. Simply put.
Yeah, I think so. Simply put, in 10 years, there is a strong coalition of employers who recognize the business benefit and the moral imperative to hiring locally, who are intentional about hiring locally, and I'm pausing. Sorry.
That's right.
It's okay. I can pick up. I
Okay,
think the
what
biggest
else?
thing is if we are able to really go deep with the companies that we have here,
Yeah.
and especially those companies that have more of a national reach that's just based here, the message goes beyond Delaware, right? Because this is a much bigger issue than just Delaware. But if we're able to pilot it here, right, get some really great success metrics, we're willing to work with other places so that it can be deployed in other states, other cities, and other counties. But hopefully, once it's successful in Newcastle County, Wilmington, we're able to actually deploy it throughout the entire state of Delaware.
Yeah. And I would add a sustainability piece, right?
Yeah.
Chris, you and I have been talking about sustainability, and this is an opportunity where philanthropy has really stepped in.
Yeah.
But
the
the
businesses to
business
step
community has got to step
Has
up.
to be, yeah.
You know, I mean, we are working to help individuals develop skills, but you know, the business community has to invest in their own workforce.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You think of the three legs of communities, right? The government sector, public sector, the private sector, and the civic sector, which is the philanthropy nonprofit side. And you really need all of them in at some level. Right now, it's unclear what the government sector is going to be able to provide. So, at this point, probably private sector businesses need to step up even more, and philanthropy and nonprofits need to be fully in.
Absolutely. I mean, there are a number of efforts focused on developing the waterfront here in Delaware and Wilmington, developing, inner city Wilmington and downtown. And in order to do that, right, you've got to help people that live in the community work, right?
Yeah.
And be able to feed their families and be able to provide housing. I mean, all of those things are tied together.
Otherwise, we become part of the problem.
Yeah.
Because those folks who live here will now live along the periphery of the city because they won't have the skills in order to live and maintain their residency in the city. So there is an element of making sure that we are training up people so that they can be a viable part of what's happening, all of the happenings in Wilmington.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Have you looked, this is a bit of an aside, but the precisionists who work with neurodiverse people getting jobs, have you talked to them at all? Because that's a local project.
No, Stu,
okay.
you'll have to connect us.
Okay, we'll definitely do that.
Yeah, we're
And,
not familiar.
it's a really interesting thing that they've been very successful around jobs in tech mostly.
Please
Okay.
do. Yeah.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Jack, Chris, thanks so much for being here today. It's such an important project, and I think everybody values the way you think about it, the way you talk about it, and the different pieces you're knitting together
Absolutely.
in this really great work.
Thank you so much for having us,
Thank
Stu.
you. Thanks.
How to Not Kill Your Community is a podcast written and produced by the Delaware Community Foundation. Thank you to our producers at 1440 Film Company in Wilmington. The Delaware Community Foundation, DCF, stands at the intersection of generosity and community transformation. As experts in community need, we guide individuals and organizations to opportunities that impact causes they care about the most. We manage charitable funds, distribute scholarships, advise donors, and grant to nonprofits, providing leadership to cultivate the future of philanthropy in Delaware. Visit us at delcf.org for more information.
JPMC has hired more than 21,000 individuals with a criminal record over the last 6 years, not 5,000 since 2025, as was mistakenly stated in this podcast episode.